Welcome to our special coverage of the Noor Salman trial here on ClickOrlando.com. I'm Ginger Gadsden. Just hours ago, jury selection for the second day of the trial ended. And over the past 2 days, 25 people have been questioned. Today, at least 8 people had personal ties to the Pulse attack. 14 people were selected to be potential jurors. Let's get right now to News 6 investigator Mike DeForest. He's been inside the court for most of the day today. And Mike, you spoke with Noor Salman's attorney not long ago. What does she have to say about how things are going so far?
You have to understand, in a case like this, the attorneys do not want to say much publicly. She was very nice, just saying that things were going well and that she very much respected the work of these jurors who were coming in, some as far as Brevard County today, to serve out their civic duty and potentially become a juror on this case that's expected to last several weeks. Now, as you mentioned, Ginger, one of the trends I think we saw today were the number of prospective jurors who came in who acknowledged that they had some sort of tie to the Pulse nightclub attack. Either one woman, for example, lived just 2 blocks away from Pulse. Others had a little bit more intimate connection. There was one person, an orthopedic physician's assistant, who said that he actually helped treat some of the survivors that next morning. There was a man who, it sounded like it was a couple of years ago, worked as a lifeguard at one of the Universal resorts with a woman who ended up getting killed at the Pulse nightclub. There was a guy who, one of his co-workers had lost a friend in the attack, and then there were several people who said that they either had family members or acquaintances who directly knew victims of Pulse. So there were 8 in total out of, I think we had about 15 or so questioned today. We're joined by attorney Mark O'Mara. Now, in this case, we had 1,000 jury summons go out throughout Central Florida. How surprised or not surprised are you that we would see so many so early that had a direct connection with this attack?
It is a bit surprising to me, quite honestly, but when you think about how pervasive the Pulse event was here in Central Florida, nobody in Orange County was unaffected by this case in some form or fashion. Whether it was downtown Orlando and real connections to it, or whether you have the families of 49 victims of the shooting. So I can sort of understand that since so much of the community came together, if you remember all of the parades that were had and all the marches and all the gatherings, if you imagine all of those people and start spreading them out amongst the community, you can sort of see how there's somebody who has some connection to this in one way or the other.
Now, there were some of the prospective jurors who did have these connections said, you know what, based on my firsthand knowledge of this, I will not be a fair juror. I will hold it against Noor Salman, or I believe one gentleman said that he feels that somebody needs to be held accountable and he won't be able to get that out of his head. For those reasons, the judge dismissed those prospective jurors. But there were a few of these people who, including that gentleman I talked with who worked as a lifeguard with a woman who was killed in the club. He was told, you might see crime scene video and you might see her in the video. He said, you know what? I will be able to separate that. I think I can be a fair and impartial juror. And that gentleman and a few others were kept on the panel for now.
Well, and we hope that's true. And everyone wants to do their civic duty. Everyone wants to be fair and impartial. But the harsh reality is those emotions, those deep-rooted emotions, and for that matter, biases and prejudices, that even though we don't want them to bubble to the surface, they do. And that's why Judge Byron has a very difficult job making sure that this is a fair jury for a good trial. And it's going to be difficult because we know that the emotions run very deep in this community about this case. But we also know that Ms. Salman absolutely deserves, we deserve for Ms. Salman to get a fair trial.
And one of the next steps in jury selection will be where the attorneys, both the prosecutors and the defense, will have a chance to remove jurors for no reason at all, peremptory challenges. When it comes to the defense, seeing these people still in the jury pool who have direct ties or know one of the victims, what's going to weigh on the defense team's mind on, do I give up one of my freebies, basically, to remove this jury from the panel?
Well, jury selection, in my opinion, is sort of like 3-dimensional chess. You know, you have to look at it from a number of different ways. You're looking at the individual jurors, definitely, and you might look at that man and say, I cannot have him on the panel. But you also look at how the panel is being made up, where the leaders are, where the followers are, where are the people who you might remind during the subtlety of your cross or direct examination or your closing. Remember, people who said that they were going to be fair and would not let emotions take part of this trial, I'm looking to you to make sure that that doesn't happen when you go back in the jury room. Sometimes having a person who's giving you that assurance can actually work to the defense's benefit if you can bring it back around and get that commitment from them.
Now, another thing we noticed in court today, Mark, was Noor Salman herself. Part of the reason, typically in a courtroom, when you're a spectator like us, we sit in the back and we see the back of their head. In this case, they actually have a camera. It's not being broadcast out. Federal court is not broadcast on television, but they are doing some closed circuit cameras. So when they have extra spectators, as they expect in this case, they can sit in an adjacent courtroom. And one of those cameras was honed in on the face of Noor Salman and her defense attorney, Linda Moreno. And so we were really able to see today that Noor Salman was engaged. She and her attorney were talking quite a bit, scribbling notes. Now, I don't want you to speculate as to what they were talking about, but as a defense attorney, I imagine a lot of times you have a client. What is their role, if any, during jury selection?
Well, their role is somewhat limited because obviously the lawyers are doing the majority of the work. We know better than the clients the type of jurors and all that. Having said that, of course, they will help make the decision. They will make, a client will make the final decision. Does a juror stay or does a juror go? But having said that, a defendant is on stage every moment he or she is in that courtroom. So whether it's a yawn or a giggle or a smile or some offhand comment, or I even heard there may have been some type of a fist bump or something when one of the jurors were removed, I think that's devastating. Now, granted, in this particular case, we're only talking about one juror at a time, but nonetheless, the judge sees it, the court deputies see it, everyone sees it. And I think that she needs to be very, very careful realizing that she's on stage. And there's one other thing, if I might. My understanding is that part of the defense is going to be that she's an abused spouse, that there was a differential in the standing between her and her husband, so that she should be coming across as small, as sad, as affected by this. And if she's coming across with a smile on her face, that's running counter to the intended defense presentation. That could be devastating in of itself.
And these prospective jurors could eventually be the ones who sit and decide her fate.
They will be. We know there's going to be 12 plus 6. And if she's making those moves in front of them, it's a mistake.
Well, coming up on Monday, jury selection will resume. So far, they've interviewed about 25 prospective jurors. About half of those have moved on to the next phase. They are in the jury pool. So Monday morning, we will resume jury selection again. I think the judge is going to bring in another 18 or so prospective jurors to go through this questioning process. He expects jury selection to take about another week or so with testimony, then starting about 2 weeks from now, and that could last another 3 weeks. So that's what's coming up. Attorney Mark O'Mara, we really appreciate your insight into this. You'll be joining us throughout this trial here on clickorlando.com, on Facebook, and certainly on News 6. So we'll send it back to you, Ginger.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for joining us tonight. As Mike just mentioned, you can find the latest information on clickorlando.com. I'm Ginger Gadsden. Have a good Friday night, everyone.